Hello and welcome. My name is Mr. Perry Thompson, founder and executive director of the Rhythm and Blues Preservation Society. The Rhythm and Blues Preservation Society is a nonprofit organization that preserves the culture of black music. And I am honored to present this video lecture on the history of Black Music Month to the Mann Library of King's College in London. Truly honored for this opportunity. As I said, June is recognized as Black Music Month in America. Excuse me. And it was created by Mr. Kenneth Gamble, legendary songwriter who wrote great songs by the OJs, Teddy Pendergrass, and also co-founder of Philadelphia National Records. And in 1978, Mr. Kenneth Gamble created the Black Music Association. And the reason why he created that is because he saw the impact that the Country Music Association had with their Country Music Month that they had acknowledged every October. So as I said, in 1978, he created the Black Music Association and recruited artists like Stevie Wonder, Mr. Berry Gordy, and Reverend Jesse Jackson. And in 1979, he, along with Miss Diana Williams, media strategist, and DJ Ed Wright, created Black Music Month. And President Jimmy Carter acknowledged this, and in 1979, on June 7th, President Jimmy Carter declared June as Black Music Month by having the first Black Music Month festival at the White House lawn, which he had Chuck Berry, Billy Eckstine, a whole host of others performing and acknowledging June as Black Music Month. You could actually see a video of his great speech on YouTube acknowledging June as Black Music Month and acknowledging black music as a great impact of America. So black music has a rich history and different genres of music that Black Americans have created. First, starting with the Negro spirituals, dating back to 1619, where enslaved Africans would sing about how they wanted to be free, the struggle they were going through, the pain they were going through, which eventually led to gospel. And those who excelled in gospel, Mahalia Jackson, James Cleveland, the Five Blind Boys, Dixie Hummingbirds, the Ward Sisters, Vanessa Bell Armstrong, Mary, Kirk Franklin, that from Negro spirituals came into gospel, a great, huge genre of black music. And then from gospel, you had a style called ragtime, which was created by Mr. Scott Joplin, whose famous song was The Entertainer, which was featured in various movies. A lot of people have used his song in commercials. He is known as the king of ragtime, Mr. Scott Joplin. And after that style, you had a style called swing, which was created by Mr. Louis Jordan. Mr. Louis Jordan was a great artist. In the 30s and 40s, he was like the king of swing. He had great songs like Caledonia, Beans and Cornbread, true legend. And then you had the blues. The blues was a style of music that talked about, again, what you were going through, your pain, your struggles, your ups and downs. And that came into the late 1800s, early 20th century. You had Robert Johnson, you had Mamie Smith, you had Bessie Smith, Ethel Waters, B.B. King, Bobby Blue Bland, who excelled in the style of blues. Again, talked about your pain you're going through. Albert King, Little Milton, Tia Carroll. She's a great female jazz blues singer. Denise LaSalle, so blues was definitely, a great genre of black music. And after blues, you had a style called, jazz. That came into like early 20th century, instrumental. Um, those who great form of jazz music, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday. You had Louis Armstrong. You know, uh, you know, Sarah Vaughan, Betty Carter. You had so many different styles of jazz. You had instrumental jazz, traditional jazz, which was the style of Count Basie, Duke Ellington. Instrumental, big band groups. Vocal jazz, as mentioned, with Billie Holiday, Sarah Vaughan, Billy Eckstine, and then you had a style called bebop, which was a very revolutionary style of jazz. Uh, Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, Miles Davis created that style of jazz, and then you came into fusion jazz in the '60s and '70s. You had Foreplay, you had Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, and then you came into the '80s, with smooth jazz, you know, Al Jarreau, George Benson, instrumental jazz, Norman Brown, um, my man, was Brian Culbertson. He was a smooth jazz player. Um, so jazz transcended from another great genre of black music, and from jazz, you also that came into rock and roll, doo-wop. Rock and roll came into the '50s. That was created in the '50s, and in rock and roll, you had a style of music that was sort of like jazz, but on a more dance type of style, instrumental, but on a more dance kind of beat. Uh, Guitar playing, a little more on the funky side. Those who dominated rock and roll in the '50s, legendary Chuck Berry, Little Richard, who calls out the architect of rock and roll. You had Fats Domino. And then you also, in the rock and roll, you had the doo-wop groups that came from the street corners, came from basically from the gospel tradition, and they came into improvisation. Great vocal groups, Franklin Lime Teenagers, the Cadillacs, the Coasters, the Shirelles, the Chiffons, Chantels. So in the '50s to '60s, you had rock and roll, doo-wop, and that was a great, great era. And during that time, you had the style of Motown, which was which basically took the world by storm. They were very polished. They weren't rock and roll. They weren't doo-wop. Motown was its own style, in which everyone loved. And Motown, created by Mr. Berry Gordy, that I mentioned before, and that created, in the '60s and '70s, Motown was the label. And as far as going to two record labels, the actual first black-owned label was Black Swan Records, and Ma Rainey was on there. Great blues singer Ma Rainey. The first black-owned label was Black Swan Records, and there's a great movie about her on I believe Netflix. Yes, Netflix. So I just want to mention that first black-owned label, Black Swan Records. So going back into the genres, in the '60s, '70s, you had, which was called rhythm and blues, soul. During that time, you had, of course, the Godfather of Soul, Mr. James Brown. You had, great vocal groups like Stylistics, Blue Magic, the Emotions. You had, as I said, the Philadelphia Sound with the OJs, Teddy Pendergrass, I'm on the Blue Notes. And also during this time, you had what is known as the funk era as well. In the '70s, you had great bands who had great styles of music. So many great bands. You had Earth and the Fire. you had Mandrill, you had Mass Production, you had Brass Construction, War. They had those great instrumental songs. Kool and the Gang. It was known as funk, and that was like a raw style of music you could dance to, and those bands really dominated the 70s. BT Express as well, and under that umbrella you had disco. Disco was a form of dance music, but somewhat different from funk music, because traditionally black music was in 2/4 time, 2 beats to every 4 measures, but then Mr. James Brown, he created a style 1/3. He was always on the 1. That was his style. He created that. He formed that himself. He created that himself. But disco was 4 beats to every measures. So disco, it was a universal beat where everyone could dance to. And those who dominated disco, Donna Summer, the Diva Disco, you had Love and Kisses, you had, who else you had in disco? You had Dad's Band, you had Brick, you also had the Tramps, they had Disco Inferno, so disco came out of funk, so it was all dance, but as I said, it was much different because of the beat. It was 4/4, and disco dominated like the late 70s to the early 80s. It dominated the charts, and disco was very popular. Clubs all around America and the world, everyone loved disco, and after when disco slowly was fading out, a new breed of music was coming from the streets called hip hop. Now, hip hop came from the streets for young people. It was a poetic, type of thing. Young people would express themselves in rhyme, in poetry. And it was bubbling in the 70s, late 70s. And, during that time in the 70s, from hip hop, the early stages of hip hop, before record, you would have young men speaking about, on poetry. You had the different elements of hip hop. You had, graffiti, the art of graffiti. You had break dancing, and the early stages of hip hop. You had groups like Grandmaster Flash Freeze 5. You had the Cold Crush Brothers. You had the Macedon Committee, and legendary singer Miss Sylvia Robinson, who sang the song Pillow Talk. She created the first hip hop label, what was called Sugar Hill Records, and the Sugar Hill Gang created a song called Rapid Delight, which was known as the first hip hop song on record. And Rapid Delight just took everybody by storm. It was a big success. And from then, hip hop became a global phenomenon, all over the world. And that genre is, celebrating its 50th year now. And, those who done hip hop, it's the Sugar Hill Gang, Sugar Hill Records. You had LL from New York, Run DMC, East Coast, Boogie Down Productions. And it went worldwide. You had from California, Ice-T, NWA, Midwest, you had Kanye West, you have Common, you have Miami, you have Trina, Trick Daddy, DJ Khaled. Hip hop is a global phenomenon, and all over. It's embraced all over the world, and from hip hop. When that came in the 80s, and in the 90s you had, in the 80s you still had great R&B. You can't exclude the great artists in the 80s of R&B. You also had, as I said, you had Midnight Star, you have Atlantic Star, you have, it was like the electro funk. That's what their style was. Of course, you have like Rick James with his funk, the Mary Jane Girls. You have Cameo, who dominated the 80s with their great funk, Confunction. So R&B was still rocking in the 80s, with hip hop, and in the 90s, came some great music as well, along with hip hop. You had SWV, you have Jagged Edge, uh, Mary J. Blige, TLC, D'Angelo, John B, and so black music was still, R&B was still, prevalent in the '90s, along with the hip hop, and of course, still smooth jazz. You had Cassandra Wilson, you have Wayman Tisdale, rest in peace. He had great songs, and so yeah, legendary George Duke was still, from the '70s, he was still great music in the '80s and '90s, and in gospel, you had in the '90s you had Kurt Franklin, and so '90s black music was still all genres was still popular, and in 2000s you had a style called neo soul. Now neo soul was soulful, but on a more I would say smooth, not it kind of fit the genre of smooth jazz and soul, that kind of style. I mean, you could basically play some neo soul on some jazz stations, but it was a genre called neo soul, and you had artists like D'Angelo, Erykah Badu, Eric Benet, Bilal, Angie Stone. They were categorized under as neo soul. Some black music has always had its different stages of labels. Starting from race music, then you went to jazz music. Then you had R&B, you had soul, you had adult contemporary. It has so many labels, but it's all fits under one genre, black music. And that was neo soul was a style of music that was in the late '90s, 2000s to today. And black music, is a culture that is loved all around the world. And my organization, Rhythm Blues Preservation Society, we are truly honored to be doing what we're doing with our organization to honor those in black music culture. It's not about how much records you sold. It's not about how many awards you've won. If you contribute to the culture of black music, we will honor you. And in the year 2000, President Bill Clinton signed a presidential proclamation that June is recognized as Black Music Month. So even though President Jimmy Carter acknowledged it, it wasn't until the year 2000 that President Bill Clinton signed a presidential proclamation that June is recognized as Black Music Appreciation Month. So that was a great honor, and again, it's great to see our great presidents and politicians here in America acknowledge the greatness of black music. And as I said, great black music is a culture, and it's all over the world. Everyone loves it, and I'm just honored to present this to you, a history of Black Music Month and who contribute to the culture of black music. And I want to give a couple of acknowledgments. First, I want to thank my vice president, Dr. Sonia Lee Freeman, who pushed me about, she's always pushing me, to do what we do. Without her, we gone so far together as a team. That's my sister. I appreciate her. And I want to acknowledge Mr. Kenneth Gamble, Miss Diana Williams, and DJ Ed Wright for creating Black Music Month. I want to thank President Jimmy Carter and President Bill Clinton for acknowledging Black Music Month and recognizing black music as a richness, as such a rich culture in America and all around the world. I want to thank the Mon Library Miss Jane Becanio and Mr. Garner for allowing me to letting me do this video lecture on Black Music Month. You didn't have to ask me to do it. I appreciate it. I know, it's truly an honor to be working with such a great institution as King College in London. And, I'm just truly honored and grateful for the opportunity. The Marlin Library, they actually have an exhibit on their website, a list of books and documentaries to honor Black Music Month. So, for the students, so definitely go check out the website. They actually have a list of books and documentaries on Black music. And this video, which they like. I hope hope you enjoyed it. This video will be on the website as well. A little history of Black Music Month. And again, I want to thank the Marlin Library, King's College in London, and I want to thank those who support the Rhythm Blues Pennsylvania Society. Again, this is a great honor for me, my vice president. And again, thank the Marlin Library. Again, my name is Mr. Perry Thompson. I'm the founder, executive director of the Rhythm Blues Pennsylvania Society. I hope this was an informative video. I hope everyone who watched it enjoyed it. And again, thank you all. King's College, Marlin Library, this is for you. And I'll see you next. I wish you all nothing but the best. Peace and love.